I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Dr. Adriana Blanco Marquizo, who is also visiting with us. Adriana is currently the Unit Chief, Risk Factors and Nutrition at the Department of Non-Communicable Diseases and Mental Health at the Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, at the World Health Organization's WHO Regional Office for the Americas. She has more than 15 years of experience on policies to prevent and control NCD risk factors. She obtained her medical degree from the University of the Republic of Uruguay and a specialization in drug addictions at the University Centro Latinoamericano de Economía Humana. She also gained her master's degree on policies for the prevention of drug addictions in children and youth. And in her native country, she worked in the Municipality de Montevideo and was a member of the Health Division Advisory Team in the area of tobacco control and drugs. While there, she was in charge of the development of the municipality's smoking cessation clinics.
In the next 5 years, probably will be another risk factor, so we are very versatile. Okay, well, thank you very much for the invitation. So, as you can see, I'm not from the academic world, I'm from the policy development world, so my presentation will be something different from Dr. Who, but it will be based on what they do, because usually what PAHO does, as you know, is this connection between the science and the policy development. So I think that will, I hope that this help in the, well, I only put the one that should not, okay. This is a brief outline of what we are going to talk. And when, I don't need to ask you why we need to talk about regulation. No, my previous speaker, I think, was very clear, and the words of the honorable ministers of health and education here get very clear idea of the problem that we are facing. This is not a problem that is only of adult people. We are seeing how kids as small as less than 5 years are already part of this epidemic of obesity. And we see that we have in the Caribbean a percentage of obesity in the overweight and obesity in the children that is above the global average. So really we have a problem. And this problem is not something that it will only relate to children. It's horrible, this accelerating epidemic that we are seeing in children, but this is going to last through adulthood. So that's why we are going to see how many deaths that are premature from non-communicable diseases, because this is something that begins very early in life. So we now need to confront, one of the ideas I think for why people don't pay attention to non-communicable diseases is because many people think, okay, that's something that when you get old, you're going to die about this. But first of all, this is not true. Healthy aging is possible if you have a life, throughout the course of your life, you are taking the healthier options. But also, these diseases are killing people in their more productive years. They are not killing people in the end of the year, they are killing people in the 40s, in the 30s, beyond or before even ages of 40 or 50. So this is really a problem that we need to think, because as it was said before, it's not only a medical problem, it's also a problem of development for the country, as it's a problem of human development for the individuals. Because what we are seeing is that the kids that are obese, they have worse performance at school. They will have a lot of more problem, because we know that there is a lot of problem with stigma, with harassment in the school. So this is something that it will accompany them in the rest of their life. And we see that obese women that have been obese girls have more problem to getting a job. And in general, obese people, they are more problematic when they lost the job to re-enter the job market. They are also problem of productivity because of the diseases that accompany the obesity, being presenteeism or absenteeism. And the salaries, we have seen studies that show that obese people get a lower salary than the other people that are normal weight. So this, when you translate this individual cost to the national scale, you are going to have rocketing cost for the health system, and you know that as PAHO, our goal is to have universal health care and access, and this is going to be impossible for any country of any amount of money that you devote to health, that you're going to cover all the people that get sick if you cannot cut the risk factors that are man-made, and preventable. So we need to act if we want to have a better country and a better and healthier population in the near future. So as Dr. Hu has commented, this is a consensus. This is nothing that, okay, someone in a desk was thinking about some measure. No, we have many resolutions and recommendations where all the countries of the region have participated. It's not something that was in the desk of a researcher, it's something that the public officers that represent the countries have agreed in many areas. As far in the time as the Ottawa Charter, there you already see that they are talking about building healthy public policy, and they are talking about the create supported environment. Because it's important the information, it's important that the people learn, it's important the campaigns, but what do you do when you know what to do, but it's so difficult to do it? Changing behavior is difficult. It's one of the most difficult things. Think of yourself, anything that you want, any New Year resolution that you take year after year, like me, for example, losing weight every year after year. And it's difficult. But it's even more difficult if you go out to buy something to eat and the only thing you find there is fast food. Or in some countries where when you're buying a bottle of water, it's exactly the same place that buying a bottle of soda. So really, these are things that make things completely difficult. If you need to walk 10 blocks to get a salad, and half a block to get something fried, and you're going to eat the thing that is closer. So governments need to help the population, not only inform, but help the population to make the healthier option the easier option, okay? And again, it was a while ago that the government decided on that. The other commitment, and here, as always, the Caribbean being the leader in the region. So you have the Port-of-Spain Declaration, united to fight the NCD's epidemic. So you have a resolution in 2007 when the countries of the Caribbean decide to take action on non-communicable diseases because the Caribbean is the sub-region that has the highest premature mortality or the highest probability of dying of non-communicable diseases in the total region of the Americas, okay? Then we have all the United Nations resolution when we have the 4x4, the 4 major non-communicable diseases, and the 4 risk factors that, as was said here, now in the last UN meeting, it turned at 5 risk factors because air pollution was added to unhealthy diet, physical inactivity, harmful use of alcohol, and tobacco use. Then we have WHO and PAHO taking action on, say, how to tackle this problem. And then we have the global and the regional action plans on non-communicable diseases. And in the global plan, we have the Appendix 3, where they have the best buys and other recommendations that were updated in 2017, where they say what are the very efficient and very cost-effective measures that you can take even in places with constrained resources to stop the NCD epidemic. Then we have also the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Agenda, where we have an SDG related to nutrition, an SDG 2, and an SDG related to non-communicable diseases, health and well-being in general, in the SDG 3 and the 3.4 specifically for non-communicable diseases. And in the Addis Ababa Agenda Action, there was a recommendation specifically for developing island states to use the taxing of tobacco in that part, but eventually of other goods to sustain the development of the country, as a source, not only as a way of curtailing a risk factor, but also as a source of funding for the country. So we have a lot of resolutions. In all of them, you have your representative. Many of these things has been lead for Caribbean and for Jamaicans too. I think in the 2011, Jamaica was one of the co-chairs of the meeting. And then there are 9 voluntary targets that was agreed. The umbrella one to decrease the premature mortality from non-communicable diseases by 2025 by 25%, and in the disease for 2030 at 30%. And we have trying to stop diabetes and obesity. And you see that it's not casual that diabetes and obesity are together in the same target, because they are so related that really they are going to be tackled in the same way. And even though you may think this is not a very ambitious, just not increase, it is very ambitious, because the increase of overweight obesity is really enormous. So just stopping the epidemic will be a huge achievement if we can do it. And then we have all the other things that are specific for diet. From 2002, we have in WHO the Global Strategy on Diet, Physical Activity, and Health. Then we have what was already named here, the sodium intake and the sugar intake guidelines that were developed for WHO, the recommendation of the Commission for Ending Childhood Obesity, the documents both from WHO and from PAHO, a recommendation for stopping the marketing of food and non-alcoholic beverage for kids, the pledge of the United Nations in the decade of action for nutrition, the global action plan that I said has the best buy and other recommendation, the plan of action for prevention of obesity in childhood and adolescence from PAHO, and our nutrient profile model that you know is what we think should guide the cut-off line for the labeling in the food, saying which are the maximum accepted amount of the critical nutrients. And we have also here already taken a position of the non-caloric sweeteners that we don't recommend them, okay? So this is nothing new. Again, it's said until nauseous, I think, repeating in every one of these documents what we need to do. We know what we need to do, okay? And there is evidence on what we need to do. So if we want to make it in a nutshell, what are the basic measures that you need to do in order to regulate for a healthier food environment? These are the measures that you have, and there is not a silver bullet here. It's not one or the other. They are all together because they are synergic. It's not the same having only taxation that's having taxation plus the front of package nutritional warning, plus regulation that says what you can sell in school, what you can sell in all the government procured places, and it's not the same adding to all of that the restriction of marketing to children. So this is what we need to know. And this is the summary of all these documents and all these recommendation and agreement that I showed you before. So if we go to taxation, there is a rationale for any product. You increase the price, that decreases the affordability, that decreases consumption. That happens even in tobacco, that is an addictive substance. So, So if you apply an excise tax, and why an excise tax and not a general value, a VAT? Because you want to make this product more expensive in comparison with other things. You don't want everything to go up and people need to pay much more money in everything. No. You want that these things that you are applying the excise tax to are going to be more expensive than, for example, a bottle of water, if you are doing this for the SSB. So this is a rationale that is not a win-win. It's a win-win-win situation, okay? We have more wins because when the price goes up, we reduce the consumption of the products and we improve health. So we treat, let's say, we stop the risk factor. Then we reduce costs in the long term of the diseases that are not going to happen because these people is not having exposure to this risk factor. And also, you are getting some money. a lot of money? No, because excise taxes is not the big thing of the taxes. Obviously, there are much more taxes, but a really decent amount of taxes. We have seen, for example, how Panama have taxed tobacco and have given part of this money to the Ministry of Health to work on non-communicable diseases. And I can tell you that it's a very decent amount of money compared with the budgets of the Ministry of Health. So I think this is, as I said, a win-win-win situation where you can have also some funds to work in the things you need to work in the country. So we have evidence because now there are many countries that are doing analysis demand of how, for example, what happens if you increase that amount of money, the taxes, what you can expect in the, also in the reduction. You are beginning to have evidence on the impact in Mexico, Chile, and Barbados, that are the three countries that so far has an excise tax that is done by a health reason. Because many countries, you don't have an excise tax on SSB, but the majority of the countries have something, but it's only for fiscal purposes. There is nothing done by a health reason, okay? And so you can hear, you have the papers. Since I'm going to leave the presentation, you can increase the paper and you will see, you can see, but they all show, and the Mexican is the one of the most powerful ones, that sees how they have been a decrease in the consumption of this beverage, and also they saw an increase of the sales of bottled water. Okay, so there is evidence, even though there are some discussions in the global stage of, not a really discussion, there is one very clear position against the majority of the position that this may not be science-based, but it is, okay? We are having in the region the result of what happened when you do that. So, front of packaging, nutritional labeling. We may have a lot of different systems. In the region, basically, we have three examples of systems. We have the GDA that really is this, but without the color, okay, just the percentage of the amount of nutrients. You have the traffic light ones that are these, that you have green, yellow, or red for low, medium, and high concentration of that nutrient. And we have what I would call the Chilean model, let's say, that it has also been adopted in Uruguay. In Mexico has the HCDA, but it's voluntary also. And Bolivia and Ecuador has the traffic light. And Chile and Uruguay has the Chilean model, let's say, or interpretative model. And Canada and Brazil are in the process of public consultation for having that kind of thing. Ecuador was the first country in the region who passed a legislation with this. At that point, probably there was not too much evidence of if this was the best one or not. So I think that is why they use this model and not the other ones. So what is the problem that we have with this traffic light? How you interpret when you have one red and two greens? Or one red, one green, and one yellow? Two yellows and one green? One green, one yellow. It's very difficult. You have 81 possible combinations. So you need to have some thought. It's not something that is intuitive. You don't see and say, okay, I will want this one and no, because you need to make certain thinking about this to understand. Also, this curve, because sometimes we think that things are just by chance, but this curve, for this, it seems that they are less, they don't stand out as the sharp lines, and the colors usually they get confused with the color of the packages itself. So what we see, and this is, sorry, this is at the ad. Okay. Okay. It doesn't want to do what I want. So are the examples of the other thing. These are the Uruguayan ones. These are the Chilean ones. These are the ones that are being discussed in Brazil, and these are the ones that are being discussed in Canada. Okay? In Uruguay, we don't have this technology. That's why. Okay, so for example, when we see so many, sometimes people or the industry complaining about why to put this. Is this different of this that we have decided for tobacco? No, we are saying the same. We are just giving a very clear information to the public. This is a right of the people to be informed, to make informed decisions of what they are going to do. I don't know why. This thing is, I'm not touching it. That one, okay. So one of the things that the economic research, even economic research that was awarded Nobel Prizes, has shown is that people, for things that are common and repetitive, people pay too little time, too little attention to these products. So when you go to the supermarket, how you go? This one, 4 to 8 seconds to have the decision. You are not going to be like 20 minutes just looking to the whole aisle of cereal and say, okay, and make a philosophical discussion in your mind. No, you take a decision, okay? That is very quick. That's why the nutritional warning need to be simple to recognize, okay? So there is a study that was made by the people in Uruguay that showed these three different portions. The GDA, that is the one without the colors, the GDA with the traffic light, and the interpretative thing. And when you see the interpretative one, sorry that it was this come here, was the one who takes the shorter time for people to see. So imagine when you see a whole aisle of things, it's very easy to see this black thing, 1, 2, 3, and you can compare. Another thing that is important is, in these cases, you are comparing for 100 grams of the things. What is the problem? In the majority of the nutritional labeling that is in the back of the thing, you have the value per portion. So you have a portion that is 10 grams, a portion that is 1 cup or 2 cups, or the same thing. For example, I love popcorn, kettle popcorn, okay? So there is, and of course I read all the ones to find the one who has less sugar. Okay. You weren't going to sing, but sing between some pattern, okay? So there is one that is 2 cups, but these 2 cups are 52 grams. And then you have the other one that is 1 cup, but 1 cup is 33 grams. So it's impossible. So that thing, and he has been criticized, but has the very nice thing that if you see 10 products that are the same, you can compare the same amount. So in net gain, you know which of them has more of each one of the nutrients. Okay? The other thing that was analyzed was a comparison between one product with nothing and one with the interpretative nutritional warnings, and one with nothing and the GDA with the traffic light. And we try to see the understanding and the intention of buying. So in the understanding, when there is no front of packaging labeling, more or less, it was the same. They were in the same level. But then you see that the one with the interpretative label, when you ask, in your opinion, does this product contain certain nutrients in level higher than recommended for a healthy diet, it's very clear how much of the people recognize this when they have the interpretative things. And when it's purchased intention, the same. They begin in the same level, but the purchase intention decrease, and is significant, this decrease, when you have the high-in system, okay? So we have evidence, and it's evidence that is rising because this was first done by Chile. So when people say there is no evidence for that, yeah, of course, because we just began with it, but all the results, and the results from Chile itself, how the people have answer to this kind of front of package labeling are very, very promising. So that is something that we think that need to be taken into account. I know that the Caribbean has an agreement with Chile, and you are working together, and there is a standard in development in cross-Q that is theoretically will be based in the intention. probably you, as a country, you are going to have your saying in that the standard too. Next one, please. So marketing, next one. So what are the marketing practices? The same for any product. You make marketing because you want to sell more of the product. That is the bottom line. You don't need. And you do it by many different strategies. Next one, please. So you have here in the document from WHO how you see different examples. For example, product design. Product design can be used as a marketing product in tobacco, in food, and in anything, because the product itself can be the ultimate promotional element that you have. Okay? A sponsorship of different activities. You can have the product placement. You have, for example, I don't know, a program in TV that is for kids, and they place, I don't know, a box of cereal inside, or they make what they say that is corporate social responsibility, and they give money, for example, to a school for doing things. But this is all marketing. This is not that they are so good corporate citizens. Maybe there are some industry that they are, and I don't want to demonize them in any way. But sometimes it's just a marketing strategy, and okay, it's their job to sell their products, okay? So in Chile, they combine the labeling with the marketing restriction, because anything that has the warning label, so one of these signs, cannot have persuasive elements. So the poor guy, the tiger for Zucaritas, die in Chile, fortunately. They recur, they sue the government, but so far they are standing that they cannot put this thing in the thing. And the most important, they are banned. Anything that have a sign is banned from school and cannot be advertised to kids under 14. So they combine in the legislation an integrative thing, so they use the labels to decide what can be marketed and what can be sold in school. Next one, please. So these are the changes that you see in the different packages. Now they have the sign, they have lost this nice thing that, of course, I didn't want to put everything because it will be too long, but it's very clear how for the kids, they created, for example, a fake package, one with a cartoon character, and one without, but for the same product, and when they give it to the kids to taste, they say that the one with the character tastes better. So that's the problem. This is in the perception, there is a perception of a better quality, a better taste of the product. Next one, please. And also in Chile, that is for the online advertising. You see that now they cannot do this anymore. If they want to advertise, they need to put the signs also in the online. So Chile is a very comprehensive, and I think it's a country we need to keep on looking, because I think that many learnings are going to come from their work. Next one, please. So the last one I want to talk is about the settings. And when I'm talking about the setting, I'm talking basically school, and well, you are beginning to work on that with that so good decision that you have taken. But also, for example, and this is an example of Brazil, this is a combined thing. This is not only, next one, please. It's not only what they can sell at the school, but they state that 70% of the food provided need to be fresh food, and 30% need to be locally sourced, so for farming. So in a way, there is another combined thing when you are raising the local farming, because they have a market where they can put their produce, and the kids are with a better food in the school. So next one. When they compare the children in public school, because it's in public school that are more or less 80% of the schools, they have 78 more likely to eat beans 5 days a week or more, 21% more likely to eat fruit, 35% more likely to eat vegetable, and the regular consumption of sugary drink was lower in public school than in private school. Okay? Next one. This is another example from Dominican Republic. There is a government project for food in the school that attends 1.8 million sorry, that is in Spanish. I said, it's so easy for me to read that. Yeah, 1 million de niños for them. What it says there, that is the basic of this is to guarantee the right to food, to educate the people in healthy food, to improve the attendance to schools and the academic performance, and to improve the health and the nutrition of the kids. So they attend 1.8 million of kids. They provide 0.4 million of rations of food, and it takes 20 million in their currency of the national budget. Okay? Sorry for the Spanish one. And then this one, if we want to have just a very rapid assessment of the situation in the America, this is what we had when we monitoring the plan of action of obesity. In this link that you have there, you can link there and you can go to Jamaica and see what are the policies that you are complying with, and you can see other countries and you can compare countries, compare measures. But basically in the Caribbean, we have experience of taxation in Barbados and Dominica, and Jamaica is thinking about that. So the thing is red is in thinking or in preparation. In the school, we have Dominica and Jamaica, and the front of package labeling is being in discussion as I said, in the standard. So, well, this is a little bit of how we are doing. We are moving, not that fast as we want to move, but I think we are doing a good advance in the region. Next one, please. So at the end, we know that the problem is big, but we know that there are solutions, that there are consensus solutions. We know that there are base evidence in the global stage, and we are having now regional evidence of what we need to do. The majority of these interventions are very cost-effective. There are others that are not that high cost effectivity, but still they are cost-effective, and they are feasible, as I said, even if in the country there are limited resources. So, next one, let's work. Everyone here has something to do. This is nothing that can be done by one person. Even one person can be a good leader, but it's not the one who is going to solve all the problems. So all the people who is here, common people from the ground, the media, the health professional, the educational professional, international organization, international NGO, national NGO, everyone, academics, everyone has a role to play for that. So next one. Thank you, and well, I hope that this was helpful.
Thank you very much, Adriana, and also Frank, for bringing those presentations to us. They have been raised in the recent past, and you have addressed both of them. We have a little bit important. The second question that you have answered relates to the recommendations in particular, and saturated fat, to a lesser extent, are the ones that we should be using more in recommendations, because the evidence is another important question there. Not that we didn't know all of this, but I think it really brings it to the fore. The other important point that you made out is a linkage. And what you've shown is not only there's a relationship, but there's a relationship independent of obesity. And I think that that is important and in a sense new. Because, and I hope you can send us the actual recent studies, possible to do the gold standard of randomized trials. So you use the Bradford Hill criteria, and I saw the ticks for each one of them, showing that it fulfills the criteria of, in epidemiology, we're very cautious about using the words, okay? And I think you already, and I hope you leave the presentation so others can use this when they talk to you. Answered another important question there. The issue of diet soda, I think this is going to come up more and more. And of course, the endorsement of these sugar-sweetened beverages reduction by the American Diabetes Association, the American Heart Association, the World Health Organization, Pan American Health Organization, I think that's useful. And then the thorny issue about where all the science leads to policy and the pathways going there. It's like a football match, you know, you go to the left, you go to the right, you want to reach the goal, but you don't go directly. But I think all of this evidence that you provided, Professor Hugh, has been very, very helpful to us, and I want to thank you again for bringing it out. Adriana, you had a more difficult task. Even though that was difficult, you had a more difficult task in terms of policy, but you have clearly put forward the issues of taxation, labeling, and marketing, and the settings that are important in moving forward. You reiterated some of the guidelines that we have from PAHO and WHO, and you pointed out why we should be using the excise tax rather than the VAT, because you know how different it is. And I think those in the audience who are interested in this aspect can certainly follow this up. And I like the idea of a win-win. Win, the third win is important in terms of how we might be able to move forward. You mentioned the challenges related to the front of package. We are grappling with it, with CrossQ and with others. We're looking at the Chilean model. Suriname is taking the lead on this. We're looking at the Ecuadorian model. Australia has a model with stars, which you didn't put up there, but they have stars, and we are considering this to see which is best. But the important thing you pointed out is that when people go to the supermarket, they don't really make, as you said, a philosophical decision about, you know how many greens or orange. I really like that, because that is the reality we face. We have to make recommendations that are practical to the ordinary person who probably mightn't understand all this technical jargon, but they really want to improve their health. And I really thank you for highlighting the challenges that we have and making us really move forward now in that. I like the idea also about the labeling and the marketing really based on research that is being done in Latin America. Yes, we don't have all the resources to do it in Jamaica, and we tend to adopt things, but there might be some nuances about the Jamaican context that really requires a little bit of research as well, so that Brazil is big and Chile, they're way advanced, but I think it's important not to adopt those things lock, stock, and barrel, but if we can do some to make sure that what we are recommending is appropriate for the Jamaican public and how people understand it. And the idea of using local products in the school feeding program is something that we've been talked about in Jamaica for a long time. It's not easy, and I think you know the challenges. But the last thing I want to mention is that we have some information. We just did the first food consumption survey in Jamaica, and I talk about evidence that influence, and I see Dr. Grizzle. She was here earlier. Is she still here? Yes, Dr. Grizzle, and I see Ava Simpson here, who spearheaded the food consumption survey, which would be very, very important in informing the labeling and the marketing and what people do and what people eat in Jamaica. I didn't want to take up all the time for questions, but I just wanted to let you know. I wanted to let you know how important your presentations were in answering some of the burning questions that have been existing. And thank you very much. Let's give him another round of applause. I now open the floor for questions that were not among those, because I think we have been cleared that up. Okay. So please, is there a roving microphone, or you have to stand and shout? Okay. Please extend your hand so we can see if you have a question to raise. I hope I didn't exhaust all of them. Come on, who will start? Who will start? Surely this must have stimulated you somewhat. There's nothing like a stupid question, so don't be shy. Did I do that really? I'm sorry, but I think I just wanted to let them know how important their presence is in this forum. Come on, somebody must have a question. Wow. Debbie, I think this has been a huge success. I think the idea of bringing these colleagues here really worked. I got to go and force somebody hand up or something. I mean, at least get one. We have how many minutes? We have 2 minutes more. Where's question and answer? Question and answer should finish by 10:55, and we are just at 11. So we must have a question. The photographers want to put it in the highlights for tonight, somebody asking a question for the floor. So you have a chance to get on CVM tonight. Nobody? Oh, yes, somebody. Whoever it is, please. Is that Rashid?
Yes, bro.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Good everyone. My question is for Dr. Hugh. You spoke to fructose increase.
Put the microphone closer to your mouth, please.
You spoke to fructose as one of the sugars that increases fat deposition in the liver. What about fructose from fruits as well? Because in Jamaica, we have a tendency of eating out of fruits, especially those that are in season.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we got fructose from different sources, from SSBs, from fruit juices, and from whole fruits. The current evidence indicates that consumption of whole fruits is not associated with increased risk of NCDs. In contrast, there is good evidence that consumption of whole fruits is associated with lower risk of diabetes, heart disease, and even some cancers. So I don't think we need to worry about the amount of fructose in whole fruits because the amount is much smaller than the fructose you get from sugary beverages. And also the digestion and absorption of fructose from whole fruits is much slower and more kind of moderate compared to big spikes of sugar load from high fructose corn syrup from sugary beverages. So I think this is really important because consumption of fruits has been widely recommended for prevention of obesity, diabetes, and other chronic diseases. How about fruit juices? So that's a tricky question because fruit juices, as you know, have the same amount of sugar as sugary beverages, although fruit juices also contain some beneficial nutrients such as vitamins, minerals, polyphenols. The current evidence indicates that overconsumption of fruit juices, even 100 fruit juices, is also associated with increased weight gain and type 2 diabetes, even though it may have some beneficial effects in some of the cardiovascular risk factors. So that's why the current recommendations from the American Academy of Pediatrics has been very cautious about recommending fruit juices to children. So for small children, the recommendation is no more than 4 to 6 ounces of 100 fruit juices per day. And for adults, it's no more than 6 to 8 ounces of 100% fruit juices per day. So even the 100 fruit juices are certainly better than sugary beverages, but because of the high amount of calories and the sugars, we should also be cautious in terms of recommending 100% fruit juices to parents, to children, to the general public, because in the past, 100 fruit juices has this positive image, right? Because it's 100% is directly from fruits, and it should be good for you. But the problem is that you need several oranges to squeeze to get one cup of fruit juices. So it's better to eat the oranges instead of drinking the juices. But a relatively small amount should not be a problem. Again, I think we need to draw a clear line between 100% fruit juices and sugary SSBs, so the tax is on the SSBs, not on the 100% juices. And also we should draw a clear line between the 100% juices and the fruits, whole fruits. So we're recommending whole fruits without any reservations, but for 100% fruit juices, we need to be very cautious.
Emphasizing the role of fiber, which is really critical. I'm not going to beg for any more questions. Oh, there is another question, and this is the last before we have the Energizer. Are the Energizer people ready? Raring to go? Oh, you're there. Wonderful. Please go ahead.
Yes. In Jamaica, people buy a lot of boxed food. I'm not even talking about the fast food. And the boxed food tends to come with a lot of rice or with ground provisions, root vegetables. And I noticed that the American guideline, I guess because Americans don't have a lot of ground provisions like sweet potato, plantain, those kind of things. There's no recommendations. I have a two-part question. How do we really know? Every time I have less rice or ground provisions, everybody says to me, what's wrong with you? That's literally the response to me. I want either no rice or less rice. Everybody's shaking my head, something wrong with me. How can we, what policies, regulations, suggestions, and in particular, I'm wondering, maybe Professor Henry can answer that question, what is the real guidelines for the ground provisions that we grow in Jamaica that we commonly eat? But either of you can answer my question. Thanks.
I'm not a presenter. Dr. Hugh.
So your rice, the large amount of rice. Oh, rice and yam. I know more about rice than yam, so. Well, I have been in Jamaica for less than 1 day, but I have already recognized how important rice it is. And myself, I grew up in China, and the rice is the staple food for centuries. And in East Asian countries like China, Japan, and Korea, rice contributes to 30% to 40% calories, so it's huge. And the white rice is the predominant form of rice in Asia. I think it's also here. Everyone likes rice, and rice is a major part of your diet and part of your culture, part of your life. But I think the issue is that the role of rice in terms of our health has changed, has evolved in the past several decades. In the old days, when people were physically active, were lean, rice, especially white rice, can give you a big boost of energy, which you really need when you spend 8 or 10 hours working in the field. And that's why in the old days, even people eat 70% of their calories from white rice, there is no problem with obesity, diabetes, because people were physically active, they were lean, they can tolerate a high amount of refined carbohydrates. They do need the calories from the carbohydrate to maintain their physical activity levels. However, the time has changed, and now people are sedentary, and more than half of the people here are overweight and obese. People have insulin resistance. In this kind of situation, a high amount of refined carbohydrates, including white rice, white bread, bagels, donuts, those kind of refined carbohydrates have become a liability, has become a problem because our pancreas cannot work hard enough to produce enough insulin to metabolize the high amount of refined carbohydrates. So that's why in many studies, including those we conducted in Chinese population, in other Asian populations, overconsumption of white rice, regular consumption of white rice, like 6 to 7 servings per day, was associated with increased risk of type 2 diabetes. So the message was very startling to my family back in China, to my colleagues in China. So we have been eating white rice for many, many years, has not been a problem, but now suddenly you said white rice is a problem for diabetes. Again, it's because, I mean, the time has changed and our physical condition has changed and our physiology has changed. And we are conducting multi-country studies in Asia, in Africa, and also in Puerto Rico, in Mexico, to look at the potential benefits of replacing white rice with brown rice and legumes and other higher quality carbohydrate. We are not talking about 100% replacement. We're talking about mixing white rice with more legumes, more brown rice, and reduce the overall glycemic index or glycemic load of the meal, and also eating more nuts, seeds, which contain very little carbohydrate, but mostly plant-based protein and healthy fats. In that way, you improve the overall quality of carbohydrates and also improve overall quality of the diet. And one of the main issue here in terms of improving the overall quality of carbohydrates is reducing consumption of sugary beverages. Because you remember the scale I put on the slide from 0 to 100, and for populations with high amount of SSBs, reducing SSB consumption is the first priority and will have the largest impact in terms of improving the quality of carbohydrate, quality of diet. Of course, we also need to shift our staple carbohydrate foods like white rice or white bread to more whole grains, more legumes, and more nuts and seeds, and more fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, the other thing is when there is a cultural pattern that is very deep rooted in the population, I think that there is where the massive information campaigns are helpful, because you need to explain what Dr. Hu has said. There was something when you were working in the fields 40 years ago, and something when you are sitting in your desk in front of a computer. The other thing that are helpful is the guidelines for the food guidelines for the countries, because there you can revitalize the cooking at home, you can put the portion that should be, and you can give the cooking and eating in the house like a new value as a family value that I think that will help people to eat better. But this is something that by regulation or by order is not going to work, because it's not going to say that you put any restaurant can serve more than 2 cups of rice in 1 ounce serving. No, it's not going to work on that. You will need to make the people understand first the reality, and then slowly begin to do this substitution that Dr. Hu is saying, but saying no from the first time probably will be totally useless.
Okay, thank you very much. No more hands. I guess those hands are waiting until we get the local perspective, which will come from the panel discussion. So Ava, hold your question. We are against a little bit of time. The Energizer people will be here. After that, we will have a short break, and we resume for the panel at 11:30. Okay, we resume for the panel at 11:30. Energizers, you need this?
Go up in the air with those arms up, all the way up. If you cannot, be mindful of those who are not as fit as you. Work with them, go halfway if there's a need. And I want you to hold it up there. Keep holding. I was watching a documentary, and it's a scientific one. It says that in Japan, they have created a robot to serve in the fast food restaurants. And they are 5 minutes faster than humans. That means the same agencies who create all these unhealthy foods allow us to be unhealthy. They're now creating something to take over our jobs. So, in light of this, I want you to always be mindful that physical activity is very important. We must have strong muscles in order for us to take on this task. Now, it is a great task. As you hear and as you see, you feel the weight? Feel the weight of the population on our shoulders. And now I'm going to ask you to stand on one leg, arms still out. Now you can feel each standing. Before, it was overweight, obesity, you feel us shrimping. This is what sugar and unhealthy foods are doing to us, right? So keep standing, sway a little bit. That's the pressure of the population that's responding. To the next direction, you see how difficult it is. Behavior is difficult to change. Backward. You're feeling the pressure. That's what we are going to be facing. So if you don't have strong muscles, we are able to do it despite our minds are very smart. Okay, relax. No, I need to jump your arms. Come down slowly. Slowly take your arms down. Up again. As a nation, we have to work together. Some of you, did you feel the weight of your neighbors that they're not as strong as you? Take it down. That means we have to help each other. Hold it to the side now. And I'm going to ask you to squeeze the hand that you're holding. Squeeze it as tight as you can, but don't cut off circulation. And you squeeze and you relax. Squeeze again. Relax. Some of you feel some people are strong. And some of you feel some of us are weak. That means some of us are stronger than others, so we, as the stronger, have to help the weaker because the population is depending on us. Squeeze again. Relax. Squeeze again. Relax. People, you're my family, Jamaicans, and those of you visiting from abroad, you're my second cousin or distant relative. We need all hands on deck. Be mindful. Healthy minds without muscle cannot make it. Physical activity and nutrition, closely related. So Mr. Archer is going to take you to some movements. Never forget, you have to look after yourself before we can look after the population. Amen? Amen.
Good morning, everyone.
Don't say.
Good morning, everyone. Are you? All right, we're walk on this one. Let's go. 5, 4, 3, let's go and walk. That's it. That's it. That's it. Come on. That's it. That's it. That's it. And two, let's go. And right. And left. Right. And left. Let's go. Right. And left. Right. And left. And left. And right. And left. Right. And left. Let's go. Right. And left. Right. And left. Let's go. Right. And left. Arms up, let's go.
But I am not capable, relationship stable. I hope we go rumble.
Forward.
My ex-girlfriend told me to bet. If you see me come and get it on bed, why not we might be full of step?
All right, wave up, let's go.
Someone tell me to never look up to the from my girl. She see me every night I go out.
Handcuffs.
She see me every day. I don't want to get the same so I can.
And walk, and walk, and walk, and walk. All right, we're going side to side now. We're stepping inside. 1 and 2, bend your back, and 1 and 2 and up. 1 and 2 and up, and 1, 2 and up. 1 and 2 and up, and 1. Clap. Walk forward. 1, 2, 3, and back, and 1, 2. Attitude, let's go. Let's stop. Arms up, let's stretch.
You see how you're breathing? Harder. Physical activity. So, I want you to clap yourself. I want to see how much you feel proud of yourself for being here this morning. And then I want you to give Heart Foundation a round of applause. So 2 claps, you know. First, after 2, 1 to yourself. Good movement. And the second one now, the Heart Foundation. Thank you very much, and remember, healthy muscles, healthy mind, Jamaican population.
A third one for you.
I will push that. But in fact, you're allowed point something. And then you pick up another product that is no trans fat and it's a point something. Aren't those cumulative?
Yeah, so the trans fat labeling is not a simple issue. First of all, we're talking about man-made trans fat from partially hydrogenated vegetable oils. There was natural trans fat from ruminant fats, from dairy, from meats. Here, we're not talking about the ruminant trans fatty acids. Some people have confused the artificial man-made trans fat with the ruminant trans fat. But here we're talking about trans fat from partially hydrogenated vegetable oils. The second issue is what is the threshold in terms of trans fat labeling. The evidence has shown that the relationship between trans fat and the cardiometabolic risk is linear, and the higher the trans fat, the higher the risk. There is no clear threshold. But from practical point of view, it's very difficult for the manufacturers to go really trans fat, completely trans fat free, at least, 5 or 10 years ago, when the FDA mandated the labeling. However, now, because the FDA has banned trans fat, and it means that the amount of trans fat in the majority of the products will be actually zero, because trans fat will become unsafe ingredient in the food system. So it means that if you don't get a special permission from FDA, you cannot use it as an ingredient for any products or any foods. I think it's a good starting point to have a minimal amount of trans fat to start with for trans fat labeling, and hopefully trans fat labeling will transition to trans fat ban eventually. But I think the risk is, of course, is more minimized if the majority of the trans fat, like in the US, the labeling led to 70–80% reduction in trans fat content in most of the products. So if the majority of trans fat is reduced because of the labeling, I can live with the kind of a small threshold in the labeling.
Right. We are in Jamaica. We hope that during 2019, this year, we will get our first analyses of vegetable oil, the trans fat content. Believe it or not, we have no idea in the Caribbean. And I'm hoping we have a program going on right now to do some analysis. And at some point, we will have to be setting targets. And this is why we are interested to know what does no trans fat mean. Costa Rica, they started from like 20% and they came down in 5 years. And we need to have some guidelines and, what will no trans fat mean if in fact, because the manufacturers tell us we have no trans fat yet. We don't know. But we are going to do the checks and balances. Hopefully this year we're strengthening 2 labs, the Bureau of Standards and the Science Research Council, so that we can actually test some vegetable oils and other products on the market to see what it is. But at some point, the labeling will have to come into play. This is why I'm curious. Yes?
PAHO is working to present this year to the Directing Council in a plan of action for the elimination of the industrially produced trans fatty acids in the period of 2020–2025. So the plan is open for comment in this moment, so I encourage the Ministry of Health to join the online project, and we are going to have a face-to-face meeting to discuss the plan. So there will be some help on how to work, because we have like 4 strategic lines for working, and I think it's important. And just by the way, just a little thing, you should not allow to the manufacturers to put trans fat free. It doesn't seem that where it says trans fat in the nutritional label is 0, that's okay. But you should not allow that, because sometimes this is misleading. Because you see, for example, I have seen in my country vegetable oils that says 0 cholesterol. How vegetable oils are going to have cholesterol?
In the first place.
Yes. So anything that you show in the front of 0 of this, like I think, may be covering another unhealthy things that are in. So the claim of free of that should not be in the packaging.
Okay. Point taken. Please hold your questions. I'm sure you have lots to come. I want to go back to a comment made by Professor Boyne, and also came out in Professor Hughes' presentation about this double burden that we have. we do have a problem of lingering undernutrition, and we have, of course, the obesity, and we're trying to deal with them together. In the past, and some countries going through the epidemiological transition, we find that, you know, the obesity was really in the upper socioeconomic classes, and undernutrition was in the lower socioeconomic classes. Now we find obesity in the lower and lower socioeconomic classes, and it's not geographically determined. We have communities now where we have both obesity and undernutrition. We have families now that have both obesity and undernutrition. And individuals with
micronutrient.
short,
But
yeah.
obese.
Right.
And with micronutrients.
So they're stunted and
All right. So please comment on this, and let me hear what you think should be the guidelines regarding this. Anyone?
I want to start with, this nutrition transition stage model. So different parts of the world, different population are at different stages of nutrition transition. Of course, the economically developed countries like US, Europe have already kind of passed the nutrition transition stage a while ago. And I think Jamaica is in a more advanced stage of nutrition transition. I mean, you kind of middle or upper middle income country, and 80% of the deaths is attributable to NCDs, and you still have residual infectious disease and undernutrition issues. So the two questions. One is how to deal with this double burden of diseases. Clearly, your major focus, the highest priority is to reduce NCD and the NCD risk factors. And then the question is how to tackle the undernutrition problem at the same time. I think this is really a health equity issue, health disparity issue, because as you said, nowadays poor individuals are more likely to have the risk factors, are more likely to suffer metabolic and diseases and NCDs. In the meantime, they're also more likely to be in a situation of undernutrition. So poverty and undernutrition and overnutrition has become a very vicious cycle. And that requires, of course, health professionals to recognize this problem, to tackle this problem. And secondly, I think the government to deal with the health inequality and the health disparity, which is, I think, very widespread, not just here in Jamaica, but also in many parts of the world, including the US. The health disparity, health inequity, I think is a root problem for this kind of double burden of diseases. The second issue about the life course approach, I think this is extremely important because we know that exposure to undernutrition in utero is a risk factor for chronic diseases later on. But here, we're not just talking about undernutrition in terms of macronutrients and calories. We're also talking about undernutrition in terms of deficiency in certain important vitamins and minerals. So people eat a poor quality diet, a lot of calories, a lot of macronutrients, but not sufficient amount of vitamin D, other type of vitamins and minerals. And that can also lead to epigenetic changes in the fetus, which increase the risk of insulin resistance, beta cell dysfunction later on. So the sense of the definition of undernutrition has gone beyond our traditional definition of caloric insufficiency or protein insufficiency. We have to look at overall quality of the diet when we talk about undernutrition, especially undernutrition exposure in early life.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Any other comments on this? Before I go to Dr. Davidson.
No,
to-
I just wanted
you
to just
please,
support
please, go ahead.
Dr. Hughes' comment about the whole issue of the quality of the diet, because I think that's a major driving factor for us here in the Jamaican setting.
Dr. Hugh, just now you mentioned the issue about vitamin D and its role in chronic disease. One of the discussions we have in terms of the new label that is put forward by the United States that we are following. You know, the first part is okay. I think we have the same epidemiological profile, but it's the bottom part where it comes to the vitamins. We have some challenges. In the US, they are insisting that vitamin D remains. In the Caribbean, where we have all the sunshine, we are saying that we don't think we need to put vitamin D as a part of our label. But what levels of vitamin D relate to chronic disease? Are we oversimplifying it by saying, with the glorious Caribbean sunshine, we should ignore vitamin D, or should we still do like Americans that going through the wintry weather that they have now? What is your recommendation?
Well, after this meeting, I'm going to outside and get some sun exposure, and it's the short-term vitamin D boost where I'm here. Yeah, it sounds like a simple question, but it's actually more complicated because we're talking about vitamin D from supplements, from fortification, from sun exposure, outdoor activities, from foods, and then vitamin D in our blood. Is that a causal risk factor for disease, or is it just a marker for health status? We don't have a clear answer for all those questions at this point. Based on the recent large randomized clinical trial conducted by my colleague Joanne Manson, she found that high-dose supplementation of vitamin D in the US population did not reduce the incidence of cardiovascular disease or cancer, which is a bit surprising because even though the nutritional status of the US population in general is pretty good, there is still a large segment of the population who have relatively low vitamin D levels. So in that sense, low vitamin D levels may be a marker for health status, overall nutritional status. And the current recommendation is that for people who don't have clinical vitamin D deficiency, it's not necessary to supplement the individuals. But for people who have clear vitamin D deficiency, of course, they need supplementation. So the question is, how can we get sufficient vitamin D from our diet, from our environment? I think there are two things that people can do in terms of improving overall diet and lifestyle, because a generally healthy diet contains relatively high vitamin D levels, because vitamin D comes from fish, from some dairy products, and in the US, some of their products are fortified with calcium and vitamin D. And then being physically active, I think, can help getting more vitamin D because of the sun exposure. But of course, people need to be cognizant about sunburn and the increased risk of skin cancer. So I think the bottom line at this point is that the data are still evolving. We don't have evidence to recommend widespread supplementation in the general population unless the individuals have deficiencies. And then secondly, promoting a healthy diet lifestyle, I think, is the best way to get sufficient vitamin D and also maintain the overall health.
Thanks again. Please, Professor.
When I wear my clinical hat, do I see vitamin D deficiency or insufficiency? Yes. In Jamaica, there are many high-risk groups who avoid sunshine strenuously. Or once they go out, they slather themselves or their children with sunblock. So we do see individual cases of it. although we don't have as much data, I think most of the data that I'm aware of is from the Met study, epidemiological transition across 5 nations. And if memory serves me, for vitamin D, we weren't in the vitamin D insufficiency range, just a little bit above it. But there was a significant tail of the distribution. So there are quite a significant number of the population who did fall in the insufficiency range, although not as many in the deficiency range. But how we extrapolate that now, whether we need intervention, and the recent meta-analysis, as was stated, doesn't seem to be very suggestive. Right. So I'm going to more go along with our physical activity friends, which is what I tell my patients, to go outside as long as it is safe, because some inner community seats people can't go, but to go outside and to utilize that for exercise as well as getting a little sunbath.
Okay, thanks for that. Dr. Davidson, can we talk a little bit about policy now? And what is it we're doing in Jamaica to, combat this, what we're talking about all day today? What are some of the key things you think we're doing, we're successful with, on the table, in the pipeline, and so on?
Okay, thanks for the floor. Well, certainly, as we can see, our 2 main strategies have really been around addressing individual behavior and creating that supportive environment. So a lot of our policy, our roadmap is actually laid out in our national strategic plan for non-communicable diseases. In particular, some of the key things that we have been addressing are to look at the food environment, both in the general environment and in the school setting, and also in the workplace as well. So one of the key strategies we had put in place, our Minister of Health, was to really put in what we call a National Food Industry Task Force. And this task force was really to look at some key areas. One was addressing food labeling. The second was really looking on reformulation as well. And then one of the third areas was to really look at marketing. How could we educate the population and raise awareness about some of these health issues? Because one of the challenges we had, there was a lot of music or sound in the environment, so there are mixed messages. And so a lot of persons were confused. So every day, you can probably even use as a litmus test when you go to some of the cook shops, what is the new flavor of the day? So, when there was sweet potato, everybody was serving sweet potato. When coconut water is healthy, everybody is serving coconut water. So what we did from a policy standpoint is to focus on really raising awareness and kind of addressing some major areas: trans fat, the sugars, the saturated fat, salt. These were the main areas that we looked at. And then we looked at, from a policy level, the food labeling environment. So we have been working with the Bureau of Standards. I'm sure our rep is somewhere around here, and other partners in working to really put the labeling in place. We are looking at labeling standards. We're also exploring, I think Chile and Brazil was one of them, but we have a set of standards which are under consultation. I'd encourage everybody to, I think you can visit the Bureau of Standards website to give your feedback to that. Another aspect which we have been looking at is reformulation, and Prof mentioned the capacity building. One of the things that we recognize is that we didn't have the capacity to really check for some of these new trends. So we had to do a lot of capacity building within the key sectors that are responsible for that. So that's another area, and we have been working with the Food Industry Task Force on that. From another general aspect, if we're looking at our settings, we've been using the Jamaica Moves platform and really addressing 3 main areas. One is healthy eating, and that is raising awareness of the population around what that looks like and how they can do that. And then the second thing is promoting physical activity in the general population. And then thirdly is promoting health checks. So what we have done is integrated and taken a holistic approach. So we're not just looking at the food environment, but combining other aspects to support that to that end. So some of the exciting things coming on board is the school nutrition policy, which the Minister of Education, Youth and Information mentioned. And that is in a school setting. We have actually extended the interim guidelines for the sugar-sweetened beverages, not only to the school setting, but leading by example to also our public health facilities. So we have also put in restrictions with respect to the sugar-sweetened beverages. And we're going to be working to really address, in the nutrition policy, it looks not only on nutrition, but also physical activity as a combined strategy. All of these as well, we're going to be addressing the trans fat. So Prof. Henry alluded to the work that we'll embark on for this year to look at trans fat. And also we're looking at salt, really addressing salt consumption. And so we're doing some further studies around that. So one key area we have been doing is improving our surveillance. And so we, both in adolescents and youth, and trying to get the evidence and data to really support some of the policies from a local context. I must highlight, though, in many of the presentations, again, one of the common themes is that the evidence is there, and when you go from country to country, sometimes we say, well, it doesn't happen in Jamaica, we're different. But what the evidence is showing is that we're not so different. The core evidence is there, is how we operationalize some of the interventions. So that's important. And I must highlight one policy which we had put in place for a couple of years ago, and that was a multi-sectoral policy. That was our food and nutrition security policy, which really is a roadmap because we have been implementing all of these elements. We've just, I think, scaled up. And as they say, it's time to deliver, and we are delivering and working together to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to open to the floor, but before I do that, I don't know if, Dr. Davidson, this is above your pay grade, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. Is taxation of sugar-sweetened beverages off the table? You can say it's above your pay grade and move on.
Certainly it is outside of my jurisdiction to really say what the future is. Certainly what we are doing is two strategies again, public education and creating the supportive environment. And as we gather evidence and implement and roll out our plan, we're moving towards really meeting these targets. And so it may be an option somewhere down the line, but that's certainly outside of my jurisdiction for the Ministry of Health. Thank you.
Okay, good enough. And of course, there's no one solution. Obviously, we need a combination of approaches to deal with this problem. Now is the time. Okay, please go ahead, Andrea. Is this working?
Thank you. I have 3 questions or points, and I'd like to claim all my time, please.
Please.
Okay. So my first question is to Professor Boyne, Mikey. What are some of the common misconceptions you encounter in local patients with diabetes in terms of diet and nutrition as it relates to their diabetes? One of the things I encounter is like consumption of fruit juices in the diabetics. So what do you have to say about that?
Yes, fruit juices are the greatest thing that God ever made for diabetic patients. That is very true. A lot of persons are fully convinced of that, as well as, I do have to say also, overindulgence even in fruit. No, and what I mean by that they don't necessarily have a interactive discussion with the healthcare provider of how they're going to balance their intakes with medications and physical activity and make it a wholesome program. So that is a big thing. portion sizes are a significant problem, I would have to say, as well as what I think as the overindulgence in supplements, rather than concentrating on food and food quality. The sort of mantra outside is, if I take enough of vitamin magic, I don't need to do A, B, and C and worry about nutrition, etc. So those would be what I would say that I notice locally.
All right, thank you. For Adriano, one of the objections we get when we talk about an SSB ban or a tax is what are going to be the economic alternatives for small vendors of these products. For example, the vendors outside the school gate or itinerant merchants, and they're saying, you're taking away their livelihood. Of course, they can sell more water, but are there any formal methods or measures that have been used in other countries that have been used to address this?
In general, what we have seen is that there are not a net loss of jobs or income in the country. The problem is that usually, and this is sometimes it's the people who say, but sometimes are the industry that say that there are going to be job losses. The truth is, in the big industry side, is that they have been firing people constantly in the last 20 years because all their jobs became much more industrialized, mechanized, so they need less people to work. The other thing is that they only talk about the losses in one sector, but they don't take the idea that this is a net effect that you can see. And usually, when people don't buy one thing, they buy another thing. No one goes every day to the bank and put the $3 that they save in not taking SSBs. So probably there will be alternatives that the kids will expend the money on, and these people can rearrange. Sometimes, yes, there are people who will have a hard time at the beginning to change, but I think that the net result is not going to be lost because that money still will be flowing around, let's say, in the market, in that restricted market.
Thank you. So the last thing is just a comment I want to make about the labels. And I think I agree with you 100% about the simple labels where there's just an impact as you look at it. I agree with that very much. I think also that we need to direct our education, not just generally, but also to children. Because one of the things, and this ties into the whole simplified labels, if you make them very simple and you educate the children, they will actually lead the parents. In the same way that you go in the supermarket and they want you to buy the thing with the cartoon character on it and a superhero, they will also, if they're being educated, say, no, that one's high in sugar, I don't want that. And it's amazing how they will lead it. So I think that's an excellent idea, and I'd go with the simplified labels. Thank you, sir.
You are most welcome. Who is next? Not again. Ava, you can make your comment now. Maybe that will stimulate discussion. I don't know. You have a microphone? Your voice is soft.
There is one micro here if you want. We don't need here.
Hold on, Ava. Mm-hmm.
We found that rice consumption was high, and we all know that, yes, rice consumption is high. But the variety in the food intake is what we really want to promote. So if we emphasize on variety in food intake, then we may very well get there and get rid of harping on the rice consumption instead of trying to say, don't eat rice, don't eat rice. We have bananas, breadfruit, cassava, yam, dasheen, cocoa, and we could go on and name quite a few more. So the collaboration with the eat what you grow, grow what you eat is also very, very relevant, so that we should continue to promote that variety. And our food-based dietary guidelines painstakingly developed this guideline that we should emphasize variety in food intake.
Thank you, Ava. Yes, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, two quick questions for the panel.
Could you state
Also,
who you
Trevor.
are, who you're representing?
Well, Trevor Ferguson, I presume I'm representing myself, but I'm from the Caribbean Institute of Health Research, UWI. So I wanted to ask in terms of guidelines for homemade sugar-sweetened beverages. So, you know, there are some persons who are experts at making homemade lemonade and all these various other juices that are made in the home setting. Do we have any guidelines for that, and how do we advise persons in managing those home-produced beverages? And secondly, probably directed to Professor Hu, in terms of, are there general safe limits? So if we were to draw a parallel in alcohol consumption, we speak about 1 to 2 drinks per day. Do we have guidelines as to what would be considered a safe limit for sugar-sweetened beverage consumption?
Any takers?
Well, so for homemade beverages, I know that in Caribbean, in Mexico, Puerto Rico, the sugar contents are very high, sometimes higher than you get from the supermarkets. So this is something I think we really need to pay attention to, because the homemade sugary beverages sometimes come from their grandmother's recipes and from many generations ago, and it hasn't been a problem. Why now it has become a problem? So we need education, need awareness about the amount of sugar added to the homemade beverages, and also especially important for children to be educated about the health effects of those beverages, and the parents, of course, need to lead as example in terms of reducing the amount of added sugar in those beverages and provide more healthy alternatives to their children. And in terms of the recommended amount of added sugar in our diet, it seems different organizations have different, somewhat different recommendations. It really depends on the populations, depend on the individuals. So in the US, we recommend no more than 10% of calories from added sugar. It means no more than 15 teaspoons of sugar. That's still a lot. That's a very generous recommendation. But the question is, why not go to 7% or 5%? The reason is that the consumption is too high. Yeah. The average consumption of added sugar in the US population is about 23 teaspoons per day. So going from 23 teaspoons to 15 teaspoons per day, that's a big step. And of course, it would be ideal if you can reduce it further, but realistically at population level, I think 10% recommendation is reasonable. But for individuals who have, high but not super high intake of added sugar, for example, if he or she consumes 18 teaspoons of sugar per day, it's lower than the US population average, but still high. In that kind of situation, then you can go to 10 teaspoons or lower. But the overall message is that you should cut back on sugar consumption, added sugar consumption, through a variety of strategies. Reducing SSBs, I think, is perhaps the most straightforward approach to do that. But also reducing the amount of added sugar, especially hidden sugars in our products through the food industry and through the regulations. I think that can be even more important in terms of improving the sugar environment in our food system.
Yeah, and the guidelines that we have for schools, I think you're familiar with them now. It's a reduction every year over the next 5 years to reach the PAHO level, and we hope that we can adhere to that. But I think the question was more about the homemade, and I think Charmaine Edwards is in the audience. Is she still there? Where is she? Oh, she left. Okay, but just pointing out that there's quite a lot of work that we have to do, not only with the schools, but in the homes, in terms of educating homemade sweetened drinks. Just hold your comment, please, because Adriana wanted to...
And before I give it, may I be facetious and say the best homemade recipes involve liberal amounts of condensed milk? Not just sugar per se, but liberal amounts of condensed milk.
Got you. Okay. Adriana.
Again, I think that I make, again, the emphasis in the importance of the food guidelines. And specifically when you do it there are examples, for example, the one in Brazil, the one in Uruguay, they are written not as a manual, they put this. It's more like, well, here's something that we do in family, we need to take care of this and that. So I think this is the way and information, this is something important. And about the question of the limit, the guidelines say 10 grams. The recommendation of WHO is that even half of that, 10%, sorry, that if the recommendation that half that will be even better. But you remember that it's cumulative. So usually one soda, 500 milliliters of soda, some of them have 56 grams of sugar. That is more or less in a 2,000 calories diet than the 10%. And in children, it's almost impossible not to change all the percentages in the nutrition profile if you give them a full can or a full bottle of soda. So it's not taking into account that was the only free sugar that they will consume in the day. So it's very difficult to have, for kids, it's very difficult to find a minimum amount of a soda that you can give them, just a little bit like this, probably.
Okay. 1 second. Was your comment on the same point or something different?
Yeah.
All right.
I just want to clarify for our local setting, we have been using the WHO recommendations. Yes, that's the one we have been using.
Please state your name and...
Good morning, everyone. I'm Arlene Gooden-Wellington, General Secretary for the Jamaica Association of Guidance Councils in Education. While I look at the points that were made, there are two things that I want to make commendation for. I want to really commend the Heart Foundation of Jamaica for this bold step that they have made. And I'm certain that our association, which covers guidance council across Jamaica, will know more about this so that we can spread the word in our schools. On the second point, however, I want to make a recommendation to the Ministry of Health and other agents, because we know how strapped we are for cash in our country, that they make a colorful booklet to educate the children. And of course, I heard the comments being made about labeling. Our children love graphic. And this is one area that if you can find the information to put out there to them in a graphical way, then I think it would be much, much more meaningful. I shared with my colleague today, our president, that had wake me up big time. It was one of the best things that was ever done to our country. 20 teaspoons of sugar. That, when I saw it on television, it made a difference in my life. It changed my family's orientation of how we use sugar in the home and other stuff like that. So I want to say commendations are up and in order. And the graphics of that makes another difference too. I looked at our cultural context of educating our populace of women planning pregnancy. This is something that us as guidance counselors have to grapple with daily, teaching about teenage pregnancy and educating the mass. But I don't really think we're really zooming in a target group, so to speak. So we need to make some effort in educating that target population so that it makes a difference when they do plan to have children, how they do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, okay, please.
Yes, I just want to highlight, I should have mentioned one of our exciting programs, which has been the Jamaica Moves in Schools Ambassadors Program. So we actually have developed quite a few materials which are adolescent-friendly and child-friendly, and we have actually rolled it out island-wide. And some of these are around nutrition, physical activity, and NCDs. And so this is a program where we've been training these school leaders. So they're mainly students in high school and primary school, and also some of the teachers to drive some of the health promotion messages around nutrition, physical activity, and NCDs. So look out for a lot more of that program for this year. But this is one of the strategies that we have been working on with the Ministry of Education, Youth, and Information.
Tamu, may I ask whether or not there's a plan to use more entertainers and sports heroes, since they really do make an impact in our young people?
As much as we can. Yes, as much as we can. One of the things we have learned with working with the schools is that there's so much creativity and talent within the schools, and in fact, usually one of the most popular things, while entertainers are important and we do engage entertainers in the process, competition, schools coming up, the youth actually coming up with some fantastic messaging that we could never even come up with in the health sector. So from a technical point of view, we give them the correct information and they come up with the messages to reach the people we need to reach on the ground. And no better messenger than the people that are out there.
Absolutely. Perry, again, go ahead. Any microphones? Yes.
Hello? Dr. Davidson, with all these plans...
State your name and...
My name is Rashid Perry. I'm a student in the Masters of Public Health Nutrition, Professor Henry's program.
That wasn't the intention, right?
Very good
Proceed, my student.
Very good program, by the way.
You think so, right?
Dr. Davidson, with all these plans being put forward about increasing the knowledge of students and the public relating to nutrition, are there any plans to employ more nutrition professionals as well?
Well, certainly it's above my pay grade or jurisdiction, but I can say with good confidence that this is not something that we have been new to the table, and I know that our nutrition unit, the Ministry of Health, they have been looking at what we need and how we're going to put that forward. So this is a process and a journey, so we really are looking at that. And it's in fact part of our national plan. So as we roll out, we're trying to move faster and scale up. But this is certainly something that we have been discussing. And so I encourage you to be part of that discussion and research. Please join us. It takes a village.
But Dr. Davidson, do the budget holders recognize how important these nutrition professionals can be? Is it that we need a proposal, a justification document in terms of how important this could be? I mean, what is, I mean, you said it's part of the strategic plan and their discussions. Is there anything that persons like Rashid Perry and other institutions, Japinad, can do to convince the budget holders that, you know, the financial justification of how many nutritionists, dietitians we need? I have the same question about nutritionists in schools. We have coaches for all the different sports now in high schools. We have no nutritionists. And while we talk about it, perhaps there's something we can do more strategically to get the budget holders to recognize that this isn't a social giveaway. It is an economic, a health, and a national development strategy to have more nutritionists, trained nutritionists, dietitians in not only health, but in education, in other, because we can talk as much as we want. We heard about, you know, meal planning. Who is going to do that? Do we have the people out there? We have them, we're training them, but who is going to make the link between those people who are looking for work and the need for those persons there? everybody says, yes, home cooking and blah, blah, blah. We need more of the home economists. And I know that the Chief Education Officer in the Ministry of Education is very keen on this. But isn't there a strategy that we can put on paper to say, we have 14 parishes, this is the number if we have to do it by zone, because it can make this kind of difference. In other words, a more empirical approach to employment of these dietitians and nutritionists that Rashid is talking about.
So I know our team has been working with helping to train more persons, and we had an awesome graduation ceremony, awesome and emotional graduation ceremony last year. And we have been looking at how many we need, even more recently, examining exactly how many we need and how we're going to get there to put those persons in place. And so that has come back on the table, and we've been looking at it. As an association, if they have not done it already, then they really, should be putting forward proposals. We welcome proposals and their recommendations. So I think that's something they need to put forward to the Ministry of Health. But we are actually working to put more persons in place. And I think this is not something that we'll do overnight. We're not going to say we're going to do it overnight, but we're working on a plan to move that forward. And I can say it's moving ahead seriously. Yes.
Good to hear.
So we have to ensure we have trained personnel out there. And so we're going to continue that collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you. I see cutlery being distributed, and our taste buds are getting very anxious. So we can entertain perhaps one last question. No? And I think I see a finger up there. Good. Please announce yourself, name, organization.
I'm Dr. Renee Francis, consultant dental surgeon in the Kingston and St. Andrews Health Department.
Good.
Right. So what I have observed is that more people are aware of, adding more sugar to their diet. However, and they are looking alternatives. I find that I'll hear on the ground that then honey, that's honey from the bee. So I'd like to know, give me some insight on that, because the impression I'm getting is that, for example, if they should be having a cup of juice and they would put 4 or 5 teaspoons, they are thinking that putting just 1 or half teaspoon in the same glass, that they are getting more benefit, less sugar from this, yet this drink is very sweet. So I'd like to get some light on this.
Okay. We heard about condensed milk just now. Any comments on honey?
Okay, all right. If I were a bear, I would really like honey. But humans, human has thousands of years of consuming honey, and that's, I guess, the first sweetener that a human might have encountered. There is this perception that honey, because it's natural and it's healthier, and it can be used almost in a limited amount. But if you look at the content, the nutrition content of honey, it's mostly sugar. It has more water, of course, and some vitamins and minerals, but the amount is very, very negligible. So the majority of the content is still sugar, and actually more fructose, perhaps, than the regular table sugar. I think it's fine to include some honey in cooking, especially when you want to add flavor to your food. And to have a little bit of honey in your coffee is not a problem. But don't think honey is something that you can use freely. And you still consider honey as a type of sugar, even though it has this positive image in it. So again, I mean, you can have some of it, but not indulge in it.
Thank you. Before we give the panel a round of applause for their excellent responses to the questions that we had, I just wanted to mention some of the key things that came out of this session and even the one before. The labeling requirements being more simplified, particularly trans fat labeling, I think that was very, very important. Obesity and pregnancy and the challenge we have with that. The recommendations for food consumption. And also the sugar-sweetened beverages, we touched on it from various perspectives. And the dilemma, I don't know if that's the right word, between poverty and obesity and undernutrition. These are all excellent issues that came out. I'm glad to see that Dr. Davidson's program, the plans and the programs are going apace. And we heard this morning that from the Ministry of Education, they're making strides in terms of the school nutrition policy. The standards are already in place, and the resources that need to go beyond it. So overall, I think it was, we're moving in the right direction. I hope you get that sense that we're moving in the right direction. Our panelists have brought to the table some of the key issues that we are facing globally, regionally, and locally. And I think it helped to, clarify some of the issues that are out there. It is only left for me now to thank the panel for their excellent presentations and responses, and also to thank the press who would be carrying this not only tonight and tomorrow, but I hope that you will be engaging all of us in this room in terms of, the thing is that sometimes the press, I'm glad to see at least one is still there. Usually when the minister leaves, the press leaves, right? But at least we have a continuing presence. And most of all, the distinguished guests and the delegates that we had here today. Somebody said that we're all in this boat together, and I hope we can take the information that we got today and work it through our policies and programs when we go back to our respective duties. I wish to thank again the projectionists and all of those who helped with photography, the Energizer group. I'm still feeling pain in my left leg. But I want to thank them for their efforts, and the Heart Foundation, led by the chairman and the managing director and team. I don't think you can find a more passionate group of persons about the issues that concern us all in Jamaica and around the region. The organizers, the Pan American Health Organization, and the other co-sponsors, CARE, and others who are on the program, thanks to you all. I hope you felt that your, how many hours? 4 hours, 5 hours spent here, those hours were worth the time being spent. I hope you take back with you a lot of new information, and we hope that we put it all in practice as we continue the journey down this road towards better health in Jamaica, so that we can be a beacon for not only the Caribbean, but also the rest of the world. So I want you to help me to thank the panel for their excellent participation. Okay, I hope that was recorded because I think Heart Foundation need to tell their board of directors that this was worth the effort, right? I think lunch is now served. I don't know if Debbie, you have anything else to say? No closing? Nothing? Okay. I see, as I said, we have cutlery served, distributed. And how it is buffet or are you bringing it to the tables? You're bringing it to the plate service. Okay. Let me again thank you all for taking the time. I am sure that the organizers are pleased with the turnout and the level of discourse that took place here today. I am energized. As I said at the beginning, I was excited. I'm even more excited because I got answers to some of the questions that were being posed in the press, in all media. And I think that we are much better off for it. So thank you very much and have a good afternoon.